Buddhism spread southwards from India to Sri Lanka and then on to Thailand, Burma, Cambodia. And that school, the southern school, is Theravada Buddhism. And all the classes that we've been through so far have been basically Theravada Buddhism. And it was considered to be the original Buddhism, but further research has shown that there were other schools that have died down. So we don't know if it's the oldest school, but it's certainly the oldest school that is still in existence. And also the teachings that we have been through for the first 5 lessons underpin all the forms of Buddhism, whether it be Buddhism in Sri Lanka, whether it's Buddhism in Tibet or Mongolia or China. But what happened is another major school of Buddhism emerged later, and the dates are around 100 years before, 100 years BC to 5th century AD. So around that time, a whole new school of Buddhism called Mahayana Buddhism emerged. And this is the school that then spread north from India to Tibet, China, Mongolia, Japan, Korea, and North Vietnam. So, if you were to establish yourselves on a path of practice, if you follow the forms of Buddhism from Sri Lanka or Thailand, it will be Theravada Buddhism. If you follow Tibetan Buddhism or Pure Land or Zen Buddhism, it will be Mahayana Buddhism. And so today we're going to talk about the development of Buddhism from Theravada school into Mahayana school. So Mahayana builds on from what we've learned so far. And as I've said, the lessons so far, although, they are Theravada, they still underpin Mahayana. You cannot hope to understand Mahayana without those first 5 lessons, which basically come from Theravada Buddhism. So the development, the further development of Buddhism came about from deep meditation on the teachings, and a more profound truth was seen in Buddha's teaching. And Mahayana scriptures represent Mahayana as a superior path of practice leading to a superior understanding. And the word Mahayana comprises of 2 parts, Maha meaning great, and Yana meaning vehicle. So Mahayana is seen as the great vehicle. So we'll look at the developments that happened in Mahayana and its core practice, which is that of practice of Paramitas. Now, when the training in Theravada leads to liberation, the liberated being is referred to as Arhat. And the traditional notion of the Arhat is that once he becomes awakened, then he effectively is removed from samsara. He really doesn't have anything to do with samsara. He's above all the dust of samsara. The practitioner of Mahayana, who is called the Bodhisattva, on the other hand, he or she would spend many eons in samsara, perfecting spiritual qualities. So although they they could be spiritually highly achieved. They do not remove themselves from samsara. They remain in samsara, in the dust of the marketplace, so to speak. And they remain in samsara, well, perfecting the spiritual qualities, but also in the process working for the benefit of all sentient beings, that is, for all of us. And eventually, the bodhisattvas become fully awakened Buddha, but only when the teaching of the previous Buddha has disappeared from the world. So the bodhisattvas are, we can say, deliberately choosing to stay in samsara, or to put it a better way, they do not remove themselves from samsara. They function within samsara, but they are above the ignorance and the passions of samsara. And I'll just clarify the term bodhisattva. In Mahayana, it is used in two senses. One sort of ordinary use of the term is that all the practitioners of the Mahayana path can be called bodhisattvas, and they aspire to full and perfect enlightenment, but they do not do that for themselves alone, but to be able to help and teach others to the same deliverance that they would find. So, it's just the ordinary practitioners on Mahayana path. The other meaning of bodhisattva in Mahayana is a mystical aspect of true reality or totality. An example of this is Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, who is the bodhisattva of compassion. He's called Kanon or Kanji in Japan. And Bodhisattva Manjushri, who is the bodhisattva of wisdom. And the way in which this term, bodhisattva in this sense, that is the mystical aspect of true reality, relates to the former sense, that is ordinary practitioners of Mahayana path, is that the bodhisattvas of the exalted positions like Avalokiteshvara or Manjushri have arrived there through their rigorous training. And I'll just read out something that Gethin, who's written a book called The Foundation of Mindfulness, says. He says, what is characteristic of the Mahayana vision of Buddhism is the view that the attainment of the Arhat falls so far short of full Buddhahood that it cannot be considered as a worthy spiritual goal. This is according to Mahayana. It's not like Theravada also saying that. This is according to Mahayana. And according to Mahayana, contrary to the traditional formula of Theravada, which states that the Arhat has done all that he has to do, the Arhat, in fact, has further training to do. So for the earlier tradition, the normal route to awakening was considered the path of Arhatship, and the path of Bodhisattva within Theravada is considered to be a heroic path reserved for the very few. For Mahayana, the path of Arhatship appears tainted with a residual selfishness because it lacks because it is only concerned with one's own liberation rather than of help and assistance to all beings. So that is one main difference. And the other difference between Mahayana and Theravada is it's actually a very profound difference, which actually it really doesn't matter if we understand it at this introductory level or not. But there is a difference in the understanding of true reality. According to Mahayana, the vision of the liberated arhat is not yet complete. It has to go a little bit further, and this is in terms of how the true reality is seen. And it's actually very complicated, but I'll just give the gist of it. When we see things, we see it through our mental makeup, our consciousness. And, our consciousness comes into being through many factors that coming into a particular moment. For example, in a particular moment, there would be, if you are seeing something, the consciousness of seeing something is there. Then there is a feeling arising that's combined with that. Then there might also be ignorance about true reality that combines with that. Or on the other hand, there might be some sort of wisdom combined with that. So all these combinations give us a particular view of a particular moment. That's our consciousness in a particular moment. So it's a conglomerate. It's a composite. That composite is actually made up of elements of consciousness. So this is not like material elements. It's just it's just a moment of consciousness. That is. So there are various moments of consciousness that combined to make that particular moment of what we see. So as I say, those moments of consciousness would be what you've seen, whether there's ignorance within our being, or whether there's wisdom in our being. And so that's what you're seeing at a particular moment. And that's the composite. What it's made up of are these elements of consciousness. And that element of consciousness can't be broken down any further, are called dharmas. And so dharma is the very basic element of consciousness. And that is what we are actually experiencing from moment to moment, are those dharmas. And dharma is spelled with a D, not like dharma is in teaching, spelled with a capital D. So dharmas are elements of consciousness. Now, the difference is this. In Theravada Buddhism, it is seen that those dharmas have a real existence. So those elements of consciousness have a real existence according to Theravada. Mahayana says that that is a mistaken view, that even those elements of consciousness are not real. So it goes further into what reality is. So it's a very profound difference. It's a very subtle difference, yet it leads to very radical differences in understanding. And it leads in very different way of practicing as well. So, I don't want you to be too concerned about this at this level. It's something that we discover after years and years of practice. And although it may be difficult to understand now, that is one fundamental difference between Theravada and Mahayana, what the nature of reality is. And this is what came with the development. So the differences that we've seen are, first of all, the nature of reality is different. Also, the motivation of liberation is different. The motivation of liberation in Mahayana is that of compassion, to be available to all beings within samsara. And now this is all explained in a Mahayana sutra called the Lotus Sutra. And there's an amusing story in it, which sort of explains all this. So in this Mahayana Sutra, the Buddha is preaching to an assembly that has many arhats. So these are liberated beings according to Theravada path. And Buddha has only taught Theravada path up to this moment. So he's only taught what you've learned in lessons 1 to 5 up to this point. And he then says, his teaching so far has been a skillful means devised to take account of the difficulty in understanding the profound teachings of Mahayana, and that there is still further training for them to do. So, in other words, Buddha interposed what we've learned in first 5 lessons, rather than explaining the true reality according to Mahayana straight away, because it would have been too confusing for people. So Theravada was like a halfway house, which then enabled, once people had started practicing, it opened up the possibility that they could then go into the more profound understanding of Mahayana. So according to this story, on hearing this, 5,000 monks, nuns, and lay people rose, they saluted the Buddha and withdrew because they felt that they had done all that they could do. They felt that they had done enough, that they knew enough, and they were not interested in hearing more. So, and this explains why there is this Theravada teaching, because of all these monks and nuns who withdrew and carried on with the Theravada path. Then Buddha then explains that every Buddha has only one purpose in appearing in the world, and the purpose is to teach his own full and complete enlightenment to all beings, and that there is in truth only one vehicle or way which leads towards full and perfect enlightenment, to Buddhahood, in fact. So at this, all the devas, that's gods with a small g, shout for joy and announce that this is the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. So the first turning of the wheel of Dharma was when Buddha taught the 5 ascetics, the middle way and the 4 noble truths, and set in motion the teaching of Dharma. And this Mahayana teaching is this second turning of the wheel of Dharma, going further into Dharma. And the story goes on. There were 3 very senior arhats, Subhuti, who had stayed in the assembly. So they were Subhuti, Mahakashyapa, and Mohdagalyana, who had listened to what Buddha said in amazement, because they thought they too had struggled enough and learned everything and had come to the end of the path. So they come forward and express their feelings. They say they're old with aching bones. So this is really pointing to the fact that they had spent years in the training. So they say they're old with aching bones, and they had not thought to be told that further progress was necessary. However, they rejoice that they will attain Buddha's full and perfect enlightenment. So that Mahayana was set in motion there. So I pointed out 2 differences between Theravada and Mahayana. What true reality is, the nature of arhatship and bodhisattvahood. And another difference is how Buddha is seen in Theravada and in Mahayana. In Theravada, Buddha is largely the historical figure who was born around 2,500 years ago discovered the way out of suffering, and so that's the historical Buddha, and that's it as far as Theravada is concerned. As far as Mahayana is concerned, in addition to Buddha being the historical figure, the Buddha is also seen as the mystical aspect of totality or of true reality or of true nature. In other words, Buddha is synonymous with true reality. When we see true reality, we see Buddha, and Buddha is the true reality. Okay, so that explains the nature of Mahayana and how it differs from Theravada. And what we can now look at, the practice of Mahayana, which consists, the core practice of Mahayana consists of practicing 6 core paramitas. There are actually, it's a list of 10 paramitas, but there are 6 of them are core paramitas. And we'll go through the 6 core paramitas and see what's involved in Mahayana practice. So the practice of the paramitas consists of these 6 parameters that are practiced. Dana, which means giving, as in donation, or giving ourselves away as well, because there is no I. So dana, shila, which means restraint or discipline within our practice. Shanti, which is patient endurance. Virya, which is energy. Dhyana, which is meditative absorption. And prajna, which is wisdom. There is actually a list of paramitas in Theravada, but the list is different from Mahayana. So today we're talking about Mahayana, so we'll talk about the paramitas in Mahayana and just focus on these 6 paramitas. Now, here again, like in the Noble Eightfold Path, these 6 paramitas are not necessarily practiced one after the other, but they are practiced simultaneously, and they go on to reinforce each other. And as I will discuss later, prajna paramita, which is the wisdom paramita, is the ultimate paramita that informs and guides the other paramitas. And then these paramitas get perfected, and they in turn open up prajna paramita even more. The word paramita is often translated as perfections. So the qualities mentioned of dana, shila, shanti, virya, dhyana, prajna are continually refined and perfected. And so what does perfection mean? In the ultimate understanding of Mahayana, there is no subject, there is no object, there is no action. Subject, object, and action are mere concepts describing something that is beyond concept. So for example, if we take the first paramita, dana, or giving, there is no giver, there is no receiver, and there is no giving when dana is done perfectly, when there is dana paramita. And it is to this level that all the paramitas have to be perfected when we come to this understanding and when we can act out of that understanding. So when we start off the practice, we may consciously give. So there is a giver, that is I giving to someone, then there is a receiver. And when we look at it this way, we may realize that even in giving, there is a self-interested motivation. We may be giving to a charity, to the homeless, but there, and we might genuinely be wanting to help someone. But sometimes when we look at this, even there might be a self-interested motivation. It may even be a motivation like to acquire merit in practice, but still it is a motivation which is tainted by consideration for me. And by training, the quality of giving or of all the other paramitas are developed to such an extent that the action is spontaneous. But that spontaneous is not just blindly being spontaneous. It's a spontaneous action that does not overlook circumstances. In other words, it's a natural and correct response to a given circumstance. For example, if someone is stumbling and we're walking along with them and our hand naturally reaches out to help that person, that happens before any thoughts have arisen. Our hand just reaches out. There is no thought occurring in us that, oh, this person is stumbling, I must help that person out. It's a spontaneous reaction. So in that reaction, where there is no thought, there was no I, because there was no thought. And there was no consideration that I am helping someone. So the subject, object, action are missing because they're not covered over with conceptual thinking. It's a spontaneous response. So that is the level to which our training takes us, so that everything that we do can be out of that understanding, that wisdom, that wisdom where there is no thought covering, no conceptual covering, because it is when we have thoughts and concepts that we build this world out of which we live, and which, when it's combined with, what we like, what we don't like, misleads us. Whereas in this true wisdom, true seeing, which is not covered over, there cannot be what is in it for me, what I like, what I don't like. It's just a moment-to-moment spontaneous occurring. I can give an example of how this training comes about through Zen training, to give an idea of what is being pointed to here. And so this is specific to Zen training, and I have followed Zen training. So that's why I'm giving this example from Zen training. So Zen training is known for its discipline. And we often hear stories about the master asking the pupil something, and the pupil hesitates, and the master hits him or gives a blow. And then we stop and wonder, Buddhism is supposed to be about compassion, about, just say that, bodhisattvas are there to help other beings. So what's all this about the master hitting the pupil with a stake or giving a blow? And this story mustn't be taken literally. What this is pointing to is that the master hits the pupil not because he does not know the answer. It is because when the pupil hesitated to give the answer, the whole illusory world came in. When the pupil hesitated, he had a chance to think, and within that thought, there's a chance for the whole illusory world to happen. So the answer that is being asked for is the answer before a thought has arisen. And we have to know what that realm is, where there are no conceptual coverings, and what we are operating out of. And that's what the master is leading the pupil towards. And another aspect of this hitting or giving a blow is that it's sudden, and that sudden impact can have a reaction, and that reaction itself arises before a thought arises. So on being hit something, there's an impact, and what happens on that impact, there is no thought covering, and that also gives a clue to what is being pointed at. So I'll give an example of if we take our forearm and pinch ourselves in the soft part of the arm, we feel the pinch straight away. We do not need a thought covering, and we feel exactly what it is. We know exactly what it is. It doesn't need thought covering. So that's where this training is leading us to. Paramita can also be translated as gone beyond. So gone beyond what, one may ask? It's gone beyond the delusion of I, beyond the limits and boundaries I place on myself, on the world, etc. And why do we place the boundaries on ourselves and on the world? It's because of the mental world that we live out of. That mental world is what imposes the boundary on I. And paramita means going beyond I, going beyond the boundaries and concepts that we put on ourselves and the world around us. And it is going beyond to the true reality where true wisdom, prajna, is there. So that's the level to which the paramitas are to be perfected, to the level that they go beyond I. So that's the general introduction to paramitas. I'll go through each one in turn. So looking at dana paramita, I've already talked a little bit about dana paramita. So I said ultimately, dana should be done where there is no consideration of I or what is in it for me. So where there is no consideration of self-interest, and coupled with all the other paramitas, particularly that of wisdom, then there could be a true response to circumstances as they are. Now, for the true response, one other thing about dana paramita that I need to explain. So dana here means, perhaps giving, supporting other people, helping other people, but also dana means giving. It also means giving away ourselves. So that in this, when practicing this paramita, we are giving ourselves I away as well. So any sense that we have of I being separate from everything else. And that is also what dana paramita is. Now, for dana paramita and for all the other paramitas to work correctly, it should be supported by two qualities, that of compassion and that of wisdom. Otherwise, they could be, again, we could be misled if there is no compassion, or there is no wisdom, because this is when, we get onto a hobby horse and think there is only one way of dealing with a situation, disregarding everything and everyone around us. Whereas, if there is compassion and wisdom, we are not blinded by our own seeing. So compassion and wisdom are important qualities for us to be guided by in the practice of paramitas. And so important are these qualities that, there are two bodhisattvas that represent these qualities, who I've already mentioned. Avalokiteshvara personifies the quality of compassion, and Manjushri that of wisdom. So Dharma is giving away of any sense of I, so that there is no separation between us and true reality, and we become the true reality. We'll now go into Shila Paramita. Shila means discipline or restraint in our behavior. And we've already talked about Shila practice in the Noble Eightfold Path, where the practice of right speech, right action, and right livelihood restrained the passions and enabled meditative calm to open up, and which then leads to the right seeing. So Shila is the restraint of the passions. And a practice is, on the one hand, to be aware of the arising of the energy of the passions, but on the other hand, to not act out of that energy. In other words, to contain that energy, not let it fizzle out. So we patiently bear the energy of the passions without letting it dissipate and acting out through that energy. So we learn to bear that energy, and actually that energy is actually unendurable, or it feels unendurable. Because if there is a strong desire in us, or a strong hate, or a strong jealousy within us, we can feel, if we get to the practice where we can actually become aware of it, and rather than acting out of it, we are containing it, then we can actually feel that energy within us. We can feel it in the pit of our stomach, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. But by learning to contain it, we are building strength. So bearing the unendurable is in fact the next paramita, that of Shanti, patient endurance. Patient endurance of this energy, because that then acquaints us with this energy, which is actually a life force as well. So then I'll go into Shanti paramita, and I'll take it together with Virya paramita, which represents energy. So we talked about effort, requirement for effort in the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is the equivalent in practice of paramitas. So Shanti is patient endurance. Virya is the requirement to put energy in the practice. So Shanti and Virya, the third and the fourth paramitas, sustain and support the other paramitas. Without the paramita of Shanti and Virya, the other paramitas do not get the sustained effort that is required to develop them. So the other paramitas would simply fizzle out without the patient endurance and the energy, and come to nothing. So Shanti and Virya are like powerhouses of the practice. And I should restate that both of these paramitas are required to be practiced till we go beyond what I think I can possibly do with my limiting ideas and concepts. I'll just give a couple of examples of working with this energy, or give stories that might hint at that. The first one is from Japan. So in Japan, the traditional houses are built out of wood and paper, and they're quite liable to catch fire. So in the story, there is an old lady living in one of these traditional houses, and she has heirlooms, family heirlooms, in a chest in the house. Now, in the middle of one night, the house catches fire, and the lady manages to drag the heirlooms out of the burning house. Now, the next day, in the daylight, it takes 3 burly men to move that chest with those heirlooms. Now, that lady, in the heat of the moment, actually managed to drag that chest of drawer out, which it took 3 burly men to actually lift it. How did that lady do it? You know, we all have that capability. We have that energy sometimes, you know, which sometimes an emergency situation brings it out in us. But, you know, in our ordinary course, you know, we limit ourselves to what we think we can do. But there is that potentiality which is available within us. And so that is the sort of energy that is required in the practice. A simpler example is, you know, say if we are bodybuilding and we go to a gym and we have a coach and he teaches us to do bodybuilding. You know, we want to be in competitions, so we have this coach teaching us bodybuilding, and so we learn and we get to a level of lifting 50 kilograms, and 50 kilograms appears to be our absolute limit. We have really struggled to get there. We feel we can't do anymore. That's it. You know, that is our limit, we think. But we have a good coach. The coach says, let me just put a half a kilo on this. And he puts a half a kilo. So, and he asks us to lift what's 50.5 kilograms. And, you know, within ourselves, you know, we feel we can't do it. And we struggle and we can't do it. But, you know, the coach keeps on encouraging us. And eventually, suddenly, we're able to lift that. And suddenly there's that breakthrough. We know that we can do it. So the next time we go to it, we're still struggling. But having known we can do it, that we did it, we are willing to try, and we are willing to try, and we are willing to try. And eventually we do it. And so we keep on doing this, and we keep on doing this till it becomes natural for us to lift that 50.5 kilograms as opposed to 50 kilograms that we thought was our limit. That's how this virya energy and also patient endurance together work. Okay, the next paramita is that of dhyana. So we will actually talk about dhyana, which is meditation, next week. I'll be talking next week about how to do meditation and the purpose of meditation. So I will just mention it briefly today. There are 2 aspects to meditation. The first aspect, which is called samatha, is to calm the mind. so that it's not worrying about constantly, and so that calm and quietness can open up. The other aspect of Mahayana, after we've been practicing samatha for a while, for say a few weeks, a few months, then we can start on the other aspect of meditation, which is vipassana. And vipassana is translated as insight meditation. And during vipassana, we interpose either a teaching that we do not understand, or we can interpose a passion that's constantly causing us an issue or problems. And we interpose that in the quietness and the calm that has opened up. And we just let it be there. We do not follow it with thoughts. We do not follow it intellectually. But by just letting it be there, it's remarkable, but insight eventually comes about of its own accord about either the nature of the teaching or the passion that has been troubling us as to what it is all about. And this new acquaintance with the teaching or the passion then brings us closer to the understanding of true reality. And ultimately, the understanding is revealed as wisdom, prajna. So prajna is the perfection of wisdom. In a way, it just comes about through the practice of the other paramitas. But what is required as far as prajna paramita is concerned is to constantly question whether what we are saying as far as the doctrine is concerned, or as far as what we are seeing in our daily lives is concerned, is it true seeing? Just constantly have some doubt about our seeing. Are we seeing the true thing as it is? So that is what the paramita of wisdom is. And just by constantly doubting whether we are actually seeing the true picture, we help to refine it. And I use the word doubt. So what I mean by doubt is doubt of what we are seeing. So we doubt what we are seeing, whether that is true or not, according to Buddhist teachings. So there is another term in which the word doubt is used, which is called skeptical doubt, which is something completely different. Skeptical doubt is when we doubt the Buddhist teachings. So that's not what I'm talking about. So we're not doubting the Buddhist teachings. We're doubting or seeing whether or not it's whether or not it is in accord with the teachings. And so the wisdom gets perfected. And I'll just read out something written by Peter della Santina in a book called The Tree of Enlightenment. He says, prajna is the crown of the 6 perfections. It is the perfection of wisdom. It's the penetrative, direct understanding of emptiness. And it is this direct understanding of emptiness that transforms the other paramitas, that of dana, shila, shanti, virya, and dhyana, so that it transforms them into paramitas. It makes them transcendental. So without the perfection of wisdom, there is no perfection of the other 5 paramitas. So that is why it is said that the perfection of wisdom is like firing a clay jar. For left unfired, the jar of the other 5 perfections is easily shattered. Similarly, if a bodhisattva does not practice the perfection of wisdom, he or she can be easily overcome. In other words, passions overcome the bodhisattva, or anxiety, worry can overcome bodhisattva, but it is the perfection of wisdom that puts a stop to all that. It is also said that the other 5 perfections, that is that of dana, shila, shanti, virya, and dhyana, is like blind men who will never reach their destination on their own, but can do so with the help of a single-sighted guide, which is what Prajnaparamita is. So that is the wisdom paramita. Which then opens up the true reality according to Mahayana. And as before, I haven't said really much about what that true reality is, but it is worth saying that sometimes the word emptiness is used to describe true reality. So the word emptiness is used because it is empty of thoughts and concepts. So that's why the word emptiness is used. And it's translation of the Sanskrit word shunyata. But when it's translated as emptiness, we must not misunderstand it. It does not mean empty like a black void. In that emptiness, everything is there. All potentialities are there. It's simply that those potentialities is not covered over with conceptual thoughts. It's empty of conceptual thoughts. So that's true reality according to Buddhism. And with that, we can conclude today's talk. So, Lavinia, you can remove the slide. Now have the opportunity to raise any comments or questions. As usual, you can do it in person by unmuting yourself or putting it in chat. And someone, has raised a hand. Someone did. I can't, the name is gone. I can't see it on the screen anymore. But if that person wants to ask the question, do unmute yourself and ask the question.
You're now able to unmute yourself if you want. Otherwise, I've got some questions in the chat. Maybe we can start from those.
Yeah, please do.
All right. The first question reads, there being no upper and lower case in Devanagari isn't differentiating between Dharma with a capital D and Dharma a Western imposition?
Okay, just read that question again.
So there being no upper and lower case in Devanagari isn't differentiating between Dharma with a capital D and Dharma with no capital D, a Western imposition?
Actually, that's interesting. I never thought about this. And you're right. There is no sort of capitals in Sanskrit or Devanagari script. So it's an interesting question, and thank you for raising that. I have to think about it and research it. But one thing is certain, that the Dharma, when we mean Dharma as teachings, which is, in the West at least, we write it with capital D, means one thing, and Dharmas, when we write it with small d, means something else. And that distinction of the two ways in which the word Dharma is used is there in the original scripture. Although you're right, I don't know how it's differentiated in writing, whether it's meant Dharma as teaching, whether it's Dharma as the elements of consciousness. So very interesting question. Thank you for raising that, and I have to look into that.
Thank you so much, Rohit.
Yeah.
All right, we've got some more questions here in the chat, and the next one reads, if enlightenment is seeing into our Buddha nature, when all rational thought patterns are overcome, and there is no sense of individuality, but just an immediate experience of reality as it is and has always been, how is it we talk about different Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, such as Manjushri, Avalokitesvara, and so on? Are these real separate entities or beings, or are they personifications of the Buddha himself, or in some way, some aspects of ourselves to which we need to aspire?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Is it from Aidan? Aidan, thank you.
Yes.
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
Okay, so all these teachings that I've been talking about, once the true realization happens, all the words, all the forms of bodhisattvas, etc., are actually not necessary, because we just understand it. And so it is, you're right, it is not necessary. So all this is brought about because we don't have that ability to see it directly. Whereas, for us human beings, it is possible to see it. And it is possible to see it because we do have this intellectual capacity. And so it is within this intellectual capacity that we have all this representations of bodhisattvas, for example. And in Mahayana talks about two truths. It talks about the conventional truth, which is where we speak in everyday language, everyday terms, manipulate concepts and thoughts, do scientific research and all that. And so that is the conventional reality or everyday reality. Then there is the absolute reality. And what the teachings are taking us to is to an acquaintance of absolute reality. And we need that because, to start with, all we are aware of is the conventional reality. We're not aware of the absolute reality. So that's why we have the conventional reality, and we can only use conventional reality to take us to the true reality. So it is within the conventional reality that we have all this paraphernalia. Once we see it, we do not need it, actually. And it is also said that, when you've reached, in Buddhist practice, when we have, say we are on this shore, this bank of the river, and we want to cross over to the far bank of the river, this bank being, the deluded seeing, the far bank being the true seeing, we use a raft to carry us there. The raft represents the teachings. Once we are at the other bank, we do not need the raft. So this is according to Theravada. According to Mahayana, it even goes further. Within true reality, there is nothing like this bank or that bank or raft, because in true reality, all those don't exist. So hopefully, Aidan, that answered your question. Good. Okay. Anyone want to raise question in person? You can unmute yourself. Otherwise, Lavinia, you can go ahead.
Oh, I can see Matthew raise your hand.
Yeah, Matthew, yes, go ahead. It would be, if you are able to put on your video, that would be helpful. But if not, don't worry. But you do need to unmute yourself. Right, okay. I can see you, Matthew.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm interested in the relationship between wisdom and practice, I guess. So where is it sort of, what would you say? Should you, well, I know you should do them concurrently.
Yeah.
Have you found personally that taking a step in your practice improves your wisdom, or do you find that they grow together? Is it sort of, oh, I need to work on my wisdom this week? No, I need to work on giving and the other things.
No.
Sorry, it's a rubbish question, but
no,
I hope it's
not rubbish at all. No, you don't do it. You don't look it like that. You describe it in the second part. You don't say you practice, say, Dana Paramita this week and Shanti Paramita next week. It's not there. It is simultaneous. It is at the same time. You know, they're all feeding into each other, but they're actually feeding into each other simultaneously. You know, we may become aware of something more in a certain instance or something else at another instance, but they're all operating simultaneously, and wisdom is operating at the same time and gets more and more clarified at the same time. Yeah, that's how I can describe it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So I'll read a question from the chat. You say in the emptiness, the true reality, all potentials are there. Could you say a bit more about what these potentialities are, please?
Okay. Okay. Let me give an example. You know, if I'm prone to anxiety, and if I have to deal with a certain situation, you know, my mind will be painting all sorts of pictures of, you know, things that can go wrong. And, you know, that's what's getting me worried, and that's what's getting me anxious. And those pictures sort of feed into each other, and my anxiety just keeps on increasing and increasing and increasing. And then you know, this whatever situation we were afraid of, you know, that comes about, and all those pictures that we had painted do not actually come about. You know, in the end, you know, when we are faced with that situation, you know, things have somehow worked out very smoothly. All those scenarios that we had painted for ourselves, as you know, that had got us worried, do not really happen, and you know, the situation works itself out. So that is there in true reality. You know, if we are prone to anxiety, or say if we are a personality which has only got glass half empty rather than half full, you know, we are always looking on the dark side or the pessimistic side. So that is the makeup of our world, and that is the framework within which we are seeing the world, and that is where we are building all these pictures of things going wrong. But in true reality is not constrained by those pictures we have built up. Those pictures have been built up by us because of our nature, or our character rather, which looks on things in a dark way. But in the true reality, there are other potentialities there which are acting all the time. And that is what then informs the real situation. And that's why the real situation does not work out as badly as we thought. And so there is more in true reality than, you know, what our imagination sometimes takes us into. And, you know, the interesting thing is, if we are that type of a personality, this may happen to us. We may build the pictures, we may get anxious, and then when the situation comes, nothing happens. Everything works out smoothly. None of those pictures come out to be true. But if that's our character, and if we do not have the practice, then next time something that causes anxiety comes about, the same thing repeats itself, because that's our character. Whereas, if we are following this practice, we get an insight that perhaps my seeing was not right, that there was something wrong with my seeing, that there is something more to the reality than what my seeing was showing. So I hope this example gives you an idea of how true reality is much more than the world we build for ourselves. All sorts of potentialities are in there. So this is in a simple example of a problem you're facing, but it could be so many things. The true nature has potentialities beyond what we can imagine. Okay.
Thanks so much. All right, so then we have a question which is asking, where do I go to learn the practice of Buddhism? Okay,
important question. Sorry, 1 second. Important question. And this is exactly what I will be talking about in next week. So next week I'll talk basically two main topics. Well, it's the last talk, the practice of meditation, and also where we go from here. So I will talk about how you can actually go into the practice of Buddhism. So so if I can leave it till next week.
Thanks so much, Rohit. All right, so the next question is asking, what is the difference in the concept of birth and rebirth between Buddhism and Hinduism?
Oh, yes. Okay. That was a question last week, which I did not answer. Yeah. Right. Okay. So you should not take this answer from me as like a scholarly answer, because I only know Buddhism. I know Hinduism a little bit, but I would not say I'm a scholar in Hinduism at all. I'm not a scholar in Buddhism either, but at least I've been practicing Buddhism. Okay, birth and rebirth in Hinduism. Okay, the main difference between Buddhism and Hinduism is this concept of Atma, soul. In Buddhism is quite clear that there is no such thing as soul. And in Hinduism, there is a belief in a soul. So what is purified through practice in Hinduism is the soul. But the soul is something that exists, that's purified. Whereas in Buddhism, if you think that your soul is purified, then there is something still remaining. There is something that, if Buddhism says that everything is permanent, then it cannot at the same time have a soul, because then soul is something permanent, as let's say in Hinduism. So in Buddhism, there is no such thing as soul. In Buddhism, it's just moment following moment, the previous moment affecting the next moment, and that is all there is. There is nothing like an entity that is carried through. Whereas in Hinduism, there is that entity, the soul, and so that is the main difference. What I don't know about Hinduism is whether a soul, once liberation is obtained, is the soul reborn? Is there, or does the rebirth stop there? I would think even in Hinduism, the process of rebirth probably comes to an end, but the entity of the soul remains. In Buddhism, birth and death come to an end at liberation, and there is nothing that we can point to and say that this remains. It is, as I've used the word emptiness, it's empty. Empty, not like a black void, it's empty of any constructions whatsoever. And it's because it's empty that all possibilities, all potentialities are there. So not a perfect answer because, I'm not a scholar, but perhaps I hope that helps a little bit.
Thanks so much, Rohit.
Right. So Susan has raised her hand. Do you want to ask the question, Susan?
Yes, I did. I wanted to ask a question about virya, energy.
Yeah.
I practice Tai Chi and Qigong.
Yeah.
And I wondered if it's the same sort of concept of Qi, which is also is a Chinese health system that's based on the circulation of Qi in the body and so on. And I wonder if this is the same idea in Buddhism.
Sorry, I can't answer your question either because I don't practice Tai Chi and I don't know exactly what Qi is in that term.
It's when you described it. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you described it as a feeling in your lower abdomen, which you said was unpleasant, and that you have to control it. Well, one of the main sources of Qi in the body is in the Dantian, which is in the lower abdomen, and so I thought, and from there it can circulate to the chakras and so on. I thought perhaps it was a similar thing. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. One thing I must point out. You said that energy has to be controlled. We're not controlling that energy. We're containing that energy. Using the word control is actually gives a wrong connotation. It's not. When you control something, it's I controlling something. It's not I doing anything. It's just containing. Okay. So just that clarification. But it sounds like I think Qigong and Tai Chi might actually be familiarizing with that operation of that energy in us. Yes, and I'm sure there is a link to it. It's just that I don't know exactly what that might be. And I'm sure they're not completely unrelated, but I can't answer your question anymore.
Okay. Thank you.
So Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much for these lectures. They've been very helpful, especially today. The distinction between Mahayana and Theravada is very interesting, but I'm struggling with the question of how, with the goal of dissolution of self-concepts and dissolving of ego, how one doesn't then become overwhelmed in feeling connected to other people and animals and their suffering. So how have you experienced, or how do you understand that difference between overwhelming empathy with the loss of self and compassion that is better measured?
Okay. So, the practice is actually very carefully done. It's, and as I've said many times, it should be done under guidance of a teacher. So, all these factors are taken care of so that we do not, get the wrong idea. Now, when you say that when the feeling of I goes, that were you saying that, say, compassion towards animals could be like overdone? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, with all that one hears in the news about people suffering around the world, it can be very overwhelming. And that usually the ego is a defense against that.
Right.
But if one is working on the problem of ego causing suffering, then there's another kind of suffering that can be overwhelming in feeling how much others around the world, or even, nearby, walking down the street and seeing people sleeping on the sidewalk, or, it makes me want to do more, and yet also feel like I cannot do enough, and that I, feel pain all the time if I'm attending to the connections of dependent origination and connection to other people.
Okay, so don't forget that there is this other factor, which is wisdom. So that is why compassion by itself is not enough. Compassion by itself can turn into blind sentimentality as well. So, the feeling that you have of perhaps not helping other people, that it can go the other way and become like very sentimental way of helping, and that misses the mark completely. It is actually driven by ego. So that is why there are these two factors, compassion and wisdom are very important. Okay, so compassion by itself will go wrong. So compassion has to be combined with wisdom. And this is the other reason why we have to follow traditional practices, because in traditional practices, all these factors are held in balance. It's not like one acting without the other, which can then become blind. And also, we don't know what it is to be without I till we start doing the practice and are much, much deeper into the practice. So we mustn't imagine that this is the state of I, it has to be, if someone imagined that a state of I means that, I mustn't think about myself at all, that is not right, actually. So that's why the practice is gradual. The practice has to be guided under a teacher, and wisdom has to be developed before we start taking all these actions. And sometimes, and my teacher used to say this, sometimes, rather than reacting to everything just blindly, it's just better to train yourselves. You're doing much more for the world by training yourself than, thinking that you're to do this and this and that, So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yes, thank you.
Right. Okay. Any other question, Lavinia?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Oh, that's fine.
No more questions in the chat.
Good. Okay. So I'm just thinking if there is anything useful I can say with the few minutes that we have. Okay, I'll just revisit this question of why concepts and thoughts are self-limiting, and meditation goes beyond that. There was a question asked today, and I did describe it a little bit. So really, when we, the reason why we do not just simply think through everything and why this state of no I is necessary to see correctly is because when we see things with thoughts and concepts, we only see it within our own framework that we've built up. And because we may have similar framework with people living around us, we think that's a self-justified framework, and therefore we believe in it. And also, that framework can be very sophisticated. We could have done degrees, a PhD in philosophy, and, we think, we have got the ultimate framework to act out of and to guide us. The problem, though, is that any seeing that we do is within that framework. It is confined to that framework, and the answers can only come out from within that framework. So that framework itself is self-limiting. And that is why in Buddhism, we have to go beyond thoughts and concepts. When we go beyond thoughts and concepts, we are looking beyond our own framework. And then remarkably, new thing opens up, things that we'd never seen before. And it could be a simple thing. We have got angry with someone. And if we see it within our framework, say, for example, if we are driving along behind someone who's elderly and they're driving very slowly, and there's traffic coming the other way, we can't overtake them, and we are just stuck going at 10 miles per hour when we want to have an important meeting to go to. We start cursing that driver and thinking how terrible, and it can go into thinking all these elderly people, their license should be taken away, etc., etc. And we go into all that through all the framework that we have. And then we go into meditation, and then we look at that rage that we had, and we let, like I say, we become aware of it, we let it be, and we let it be in that quietness. And in that quietness, suddenly new saying might start appearing beyond, that framework that we had. We may suddenly realize, that I've got a father who's elderly. He quite likes to be independent. And, if he could not drive, his life would not be the same. And then a sudden difference, a turning in attitude comes over. So that's how, we can be limited by our own seeing, and how meditation can open out our seeing, and we can see a much wider, or we can see a situation in its much wider context. And so that's why, thoughts and concepts and the framework they're built up, as I've said, they are useful. They are a gift that we have, that we can think, that we can build concepts. That's what's enabling us to go into space, if there's someone from the other side of the world, for that person to be able to listen to this talk, that's all come to thoughts, thinking, concepts. But those are self-limiting, and it is when we see beyond all that we then start seeing true reality. Okay, so with that, I'll conclude this talk. And so next week, last talk, it's about meditation and where we go from here. So I look forward to seeing you all there.